Hey y'all, it's Amanda and it is a beautiful fall morning, and today we're going to be talking about my favorite winter blooming plants. Now, I am in zone 8 in Texas, so my winter blooming plants are probably going to be different from those of you who are further up north or in colder zones. But winter doesn't have to be a time where your garden is dead, right? You can definitely have winter interest throughout your space, whether it is, dried branches, blooming plants, or foliage. There's definitely a lot of ways to get some interest in your winter garden. Here in Texas, there are so many plants that keep blooming even when the temperatures drop, and some actually prefer the colder weather. Whew. When I moved this into the sun, it was like blindingly white. So why winter gardens can matter. Winter color lifts your spirits when the rest of the landscape is resting. And I have found over the years, as I have put a little bit into putting a few blooms out in my garden for the winter, I really get a ton of enjoyment back from that. I'm a busy mom and I come to and from my house a million times a day, and there's nothing like pulling up to the house and seeing some beautiful violas and dusty miller tucked into the landscape. It's also a chance to showcase foliage textures and subtle contrasts. I tend to have a very bold color palette throughout the spring and summer and fall. So in the winter, it gives me an opportunity to do something a little bit softer. And I think that's really nice because it allows me that opportunity to explore a different kind of color scheme for myself. And one of the best things about some of these blooming plants that I can plant here in the winter is that they bridge that gap between late fall cleanup and early spring planting. And most of these are extremely easy to care for. So let's talk about some cool season annuals that keep blooming through the winter. These are perfect for container gardens, borders, and window boxes. Most of my stuff I put directly into the ground because it does better and it stays warmer in the ground than it would in a container. So first on my list is the obvious pansies and violas, and they have been something that over the years I have come to really appreciate in my landscape in the winter, but also into the spring. Their bloom time is about November through March in my particular area. Their colors are in every shade imaginable, from pastel blues to bright oranges and to deep purples. I actually prefer the penny blue viola, which is a really bold, intense cobalt blue color. I love it. For care, they prefer full sun to part shade, moist soil, deadhead regularly for constant blooms. And a tip about violas is that they can handle extreme cold even better than pansies and bounce back faster through the freezes. I tend to lean more towards violas. I appreciate their shape and size better than I do on pansies. And once again, if we end up having a rough winter, which sometimes happens in my Texas Zone 8 area, the violas handle that winter far better than pansies do. Now, in years past, I've grown my violas and pansies from seed, and they are very easy to start, with the exception of one thing. When you start them from seed, they need darkness in order to germinate. So I quite frequently will start them inside a trash bag so it's nice and dark. You have to check on a daily basis. This year I didn't get around to it. I just had a lot going in the fall, and I started a bunch of fall annuals, so I just skipped it this year. But I am definitely going to be picking some up for my garden, and will probably go ahead and plant them probably about mid-November. Okay, next on my list is snapdragons. And when I'm talking about snapdragons, I'm really talking more about ones that I would put in my landscape at this point. I've already planted my snapdragons that I'm growing for cut flowers for next season. I started them from seed, and I've got them out in the garden. But snapdragons are a very whimsical bloom to have in the garden. Quite frequently, they will die back a little bit during the winter, and then they will come into full bloom late winter, which I love. So varieties of snapdragons that I like to have for the landscape: the Rocket Mix, which can also be utilized for cut flowers, Liberty Classic, and any dwarf varieties for containers or in the ground as well. I quite frequently like to pick up the burgundy dark pink ones because I think those look great in the landscape for the winter. Bloom time for them is late fall to early spring. Care is they are cool weather lovers. They do not like the heat. So as soon as the heat hits, they really, really struggle and start blooming. You want to pinch early growth if you want them to have fuller plants. So a lot of times with seedlings for snapdragons, you plant them and they'll grow one long, bloom. But if you pinch that bloom way earlier, it will bush out more and create more blooms. A few design ideas for snapdragons is to mix pink and white snapdragons with dusty Miller for a romantic winter look. And that is actually something that I am leaning towards doing this year, really focusing on pink, white with dusty Miller. And whether that's a mix of violet snapdragons, I'm not really sure, but I'm really thinking that would be an interesting look for my front garden. And I will say that snapdragons, once you get through the depths of the winter, they come back ferociously in late winter, early spring, and they are really great for bridging that gap into early spring before you're planting out your spring annuals. So they're a really great option for your landscape. Okay, next on my list is Sweet Alyssum, and it is known for its fragrance. It has a really rich, honey-scented fragrance. One of the few flowers you can still smell in the winter. A lot of the winter flowers don't have a lot of that sweet scent to them. But Sweet Alyssum, I feel like you can just walk by it, and if it's a little bit of sun is hitting it, it just smells absolutely amazing. For care, it loves cool air, it sprawls gently over borders, and self-seeds easily. Now, I've grown Alyssum from seed. It did fine. I actually prefer some of the stronger like Snow Queen, Snow Princess varieties that you can get from Proven Winners. I don't quite frequently lean absolutely towards Proven Winners plants, but this particular variety, their Alyssums are ridiculous. And so if you want to see an abundance of blooms, I think it's worth it to invest in a few of those for your front border or to mix in with some of your plants for the winter. Okay, let's go to another category. Let's talk about winter perennials and shrubs that will steal the show in winter. These plants come back year after year and bloom during the cooler months. And in Zone 8, there's still time to get a lot of these planted. It's actually a really optimal time to get a lot of these planted. So first on my list is something I want so bad, but have never taken the leap to do, and that is camellias, specifically Camellia Sassafras, y'all know I'm going to butcher it, for our particular area. The bloom time for Sassafras varieties bloom late fall to mid-winter. The colors tend to be shades of pink, red, white, perfect for southern gardens. Now, for care, they do require acidic soil, well-draining soil, part shade to morning sun, and you need a mulch to keep their roots nice and cool. They do not like the heat whatsoever. I don't think there's anything like a camellia bloom. They're so unique, and they bloom at the time of the year where there's nothing else going. So they really stand up, and they're unusual and whimsical looking. Now, they're expensive. That's more of an expensive plant. So I haven't taken the leap on that because I'm afraid I'm going to plant it once and it's never going to bloom again. So I haven't taken the leap on it, but the Sassafras varieties are very specifically really great for southern gardens. Sorry, I'm scratching my poison ivy that I'm happier that I got from the back of the garden. Now, a bonus in regards to camellias, the evergreen foliage adds structure year round. So once you go shift into the spring and summer and fall, it really becomes more of a background shrub, which creates a beautiful backdrop for whatever else you're growing within your garden. But camellias is definitely on my list. I have some areas specifically back behind the willow tree that I think would be lovely, but I haven't really gotten that area of the garden going. So until that happens, I'll have to hold off and just keep dreaming of camellias. Okay, next on my list for perennials is Lenten roses or hellebore. I love Lenten roses or hellebore. They are crazy expensive. I really need to teach myself how to potentially propagate them. If that's a possibility, I would really love to do that. The bloom time for hellebore is late winter through early spring. They are the harbingers of spring. I feel like they start showing up just when the weather just slightly starts to warm up, which I absolutely love. The colors include mauves, cream, green, plum, and even near black blooms, which I have a black diamond hellebore, which is absolutely stunning. For care, they are shade loving and deer resistant, and they prefer moist but well draining soil. Quite frequently, I like to tuck a lot of my hellebores, specifically my front landscape, among my shrubs, among my boxwoods, things like that, so that during the summer, those boxwoods and shrubs, they shade the hellebores from my really intense summer heat and sun. And I found that it works really beautiful. I probably have 8 varieties of hellebore. I have quite a few in the shade garden as well. And they make for excellent cut flowers, very unusual cut flowers as well. So very unique, little pricey, but very cool blooms. One tip is old foliage can be trimmed back before the buds emerge to show off the flowers better. So we're really basically at a time where I'm going to be cleaning up, continue cleaning up my fall garden. Actually, everything's in bloom. It's beautiful. I probably have another month and then everything will start dying back and I will go in and I will trim back those hellebore foliage in order to make sure that I can see those distinct blooms when it's time for them to come about. Okay, next on my list is one that I want, but I don't currently have, and that is winter daphne. And winter daphne has a bloom time of January through March, so really in the depths of winter. The fragrance is incredibly sweet and strong. It's perfect near walking paths or entrances. It really has a bloom that looks like it should be blooming in spring, in my opinion. Just a very unique, unusual plant, and I would like to tuck it into a few places in my garden, if anything, just for the scent, because it's supposed to smell so amazing. For care, it needs well-draining soil and protection from hot afternoon sun, so it definitely need to be in an area that's a little bit more deeper shade, and that definitely gets no afternoon sun during even my spring, because my springs can get pretty hot. I don't want the plant to die during the spring and summer. That's something that happens quite frequently with some of these cool living plants. So I need to make sure it's in a protected area so that it can withstand the heat of my summers. Okay, switching over, let's talk about ornamental foliage with winter personality. These aren't necessarily blooming, but they do add vibrant texture and color throughout your landscape. Okay, so first is ornamental cabbage and kale. This is something we quite frequently see in the nurseries. It's all available right now. It looks great in fall containers, but also does really great here for the winter. The colors tend to be white, pink, purple, and magenta, of course mixed with lots of green. For care, they require full sun and cool weather enhances the color. So the cooler your weather gets, the cooler, the more interesting this color is going to be on the ornamental cabbage and kale, and they are extremely frost tolerant. Now, once your temperatures start to rise in the spring, they bolt very quickly, so they do have to be replaced fairly early in the spring for that reason. A tip for them is they're perfect for borders or paired with pansies in containers. I really think it depends on the variety you get, because some of these cabbage and kale get massive and they don't look as good with the pansies and the violas if it's a really big one. But I do love these in sets of 3, 5, and 7 clustered together. I think they make big, bold statements within your space. All right, next on my list is Dusty Miller, which is hands down one of my favorite things to plant here in winter for Texas Zone 8. It is a silvery gray foliage that makes winter colors pop. And it really looks like it's dusted with a frost, which is absolutely lovely. For care, it's drought tolerant, loves full sun, and is evergreen through mild winters. And it actually can act as a tender perennial here in my areas. It actually will put off spring blooms that are tall, elegant yellow flowers that I absolutely love. They have a whimsical look to them. And then it also makes for great cut foliage for arrangements as well. I typically end up pulling them out by May because I'm making room for other things, and I think that they don't look as great through the hotter parts of the year. But come cooler parts of the year, you can cut them back and they will refresh with new foliage. So they can act as a tender perennial in here. I pretty much can't treat them like an annual. But there's something to be said about Dusty Miller tucked into landscapes, especially in this area. And like I said, one of the design aspects I'm wanting to go with is perhaps pink and white blooms with Dusty Miller foliage. I think would be lovely and light and airy in my garden and would bring interest throughout the entire winter. Okay, and finally on the foliage list is heuchera or coral bells. The foliage color is plum, amber, lime, silver leaves. They are evergreen in zone 8. They need good drainage and part shade. and I think that they add a lot of interesting texture. I think they bridge a gap from fall into winter as well. If we get a really hard hit winter, they don't do as well and they will die back to the ground. I've also found that heucheras and coral bells do best for me in containers. They do not do great in my clay soil, and I think because it doesn't drain very well. So for a few years now, I've been planting the heucheras in containers and they're lovely. This past year I actually grew several from seed and it was so easy. And I need to basically grow all my heucheras from now on because they're pricey when you go to the nurseries. They're a little bit more expensive than most plants. And they were so easy to grow from seed and they were so beautiful because they showed their colors so early on. And I'm definitely going to be starting some more of those, probably starting in January. I really just want my shade garden to be filled with tons of heucheras and lots of color and texture. And heucheras and coral bells really do that for a landscape. Okay, next category is a few unexpected winter performers, things that you might not necessarily think about. These are more unique plants that bloom during the winter. Paperwhites is a really fun one, especially if you're working with those inside. The bloom time is December to January. The fragrance is strong, spicy, sweet scent, especially if you get the Ziva variety, which is what is commonly available in nurseries. It has a very intense, strong scent. A tip, easy to force indoors or plant in pots outdoors in sheltered spots. They can't handle a lot of rain or wind or things like that, but you can plant them in some sheltered spots. I prefer to start mine inside. I think they're really fun. I do not start them for the holidays. I like to start them in January at a time of the year where all my holiday decor is put away and I want a bit of freshness in my house. And that is a perfect time to start paperwhites. And I will have a video of those coming up in January. Next on the list is cyclamen. Its bloom time is late fall through winter. Its colors are pink, white, red, lavender. Absolutely beautiful, very unique looking blooms. They actually always look like they're looking downwards. For care, they are shade loving and you need to keep the soil lightly moist. You can't let it dry out or they will not rebound. And they're great for porches or north facing spots. So my front porch is a north facing garden and I would love to go ahead and tuck some beautiful cyclamen into some of my containers for the winter. I think it would be lovely. And if I'm carrying on with my color scheme I'm thinking about, a lot of cyclamen in pinks and whites would be so pretty. Next is primrose. This tends to be a little bit more later winter, in my opinion. The bloom time is winter through early spring. The colors are brilliant red, pink, purple, and yellow blooms. For caring for them, they need moist, rich soil in partial shade. And they are some of the first blooms that I see in the nurseries every season. I actually like to plant them up in a container and bring them inside my home and really just enjoy those bright, cheerful colors right before spring hits. Very, very fun, unique. They almost don't look real because the blooms are just so sweet and so perfect. Okay, so we talked about a bunch of different varieties of plants. And truthfully, if you went and got all those plants, it'd be a massive jumble of chaos in your garden. You don't need to go get all of those plants for winter. So let's talk about some design tips for winter color. All right, so we want to mix evergreen structure like boxwoods or rosemary with your bloomers. And you should definitely think of some of your evergreen as a backdrop for your winter blooming annuals. You want to use elevated containers or metal troughs for drainage during winter rains. A lot of times we get a lot more rain during the winter here, and if my plants or my containers don't drain well, all of those plants will rot. So lifting them up in containers helps a lot, especially for things like pansies and violas. They do beautifully in containers during the winter. You want to choose contrasting textures, such as like a glossy camellia leaves beside ruffled kale or pansy blooms. You don't want too much of the same altogether, right? I also think it's really important when you've got maybe a flat of pansies, instead of spacing them all out 1 foot, bring them all together and bring them into a patch of color closer together to make a bigger, bolder color statement instead of trying to spread out these little bitty plants throughout your entire front garden. I drive by quite frequently in my neighborhood and I'm like, I want to go get that one flat of pansies that they all spread out 18 plants across 20 feet of space and you can't even see the plants. Instead, gather all of those up by your front walkway so that when you pass, you see a burst of color all together. You want to layer height, so shorter annuals are in front of taller shrubs or grasses. Layering height's always important. Dusty Miller can get much taller than you would think, so make sure you look at what the height is going to be prior to planting it in front of things like pansies and violas. And you want to add lighting for magical evening color. Fairy lights or spotlights on camellias or kale is absolutely stunning. And lighting is one of the things I'm especially going to be working on in my back garden this year. I have several lighting elements that I would like to include so that I can have a twinkly frosted look throughout my garden this coming winter. Okay, hope you guys enjoyed this. What's your favorite winter blooms? Do you even have winter blooms during the winter? I know some of my subscribers have very deep cold winters and pretty much everything is dead or dormant. And so you might not see very many blooms during the winter. But those of y'all who have a little bit more of a mild winter, let me know what your favorite winter blooms are. And if you've gotten this far in the video, I do have a free downloadable PDF in my Patreon community if you want to go check it out. And it will download all this information for you in regards to these winter blooming plants so that you can tuck it away in your journal or take it with you to whatever shopping you're going to be doing at the nursery so that you can plan ahead for your winter blooming annuals. And for my Patreon community, the link is in the video description below. If you're on a gardening journey like me, if you want to be surrounded by some great people who love to talk about gardening on a daily basis, you might want to come check us out and join. There's a free tier and there is one paid tier. The paid tier is called Certified Mad Gardener. And with that tier, you get access to lives, exclusive videos, photo sharing, and group chats. All right, you all, as always, she's a mad gardener or a decorator or anything else that she wants to be. Thanks, y'all.